Katie Sullivan pressed her face against the cold metal wall of her cell and listened. The alien ship hummed with strange sounds that she had learned to recognize over the past 3 weeks. Footsteps in the hallway meant the guards were coming. The high-pitched whine meant they were testing their weapons. The low rumble meant the ship was changing direction. Right now, she heard nothing but the steady hum of the engines. Good. That meant she had time to think. Katie was 19 years old and had been working as a communications officer on a small cargo ship when the aliens attacked. The ship she worked on was called the Steady Wind, and it carried supplies between the outer colonies. Nothing important. Nothing that should have attracted attention from anyone, especially not from aliens, that could travel between stars. But the aliens had found them anyway. They had appeared out of nowhere with their massive ship that looked like it was made of black glass and silver metal. The Steady Wind never had a chance to fight back or run away. The alien ship had just reached out with some kind of energy, beam, and pulled them inside like a fish caught on a line. Katie was the only survivor. She did not know what happened to Captain Brooks or to Amy, the other crew member. The aliens had separated them as soon as they were captured. Katie had been alone ever since the aliens called themselves the Villani. They were tall and thin, much taller than humans, with skin that looked like it was made of pale blue crystal. Their faces were narrow and their eyes were large and completely black. They moved in a way that reminded Katie of dancers, smooth and graceful, like they were floating instead of walking. Katie had learned their language by listening carefully every day. The Villani thought humans were too stupid to understand them, so they talked openly in front of her. They did not know that Katie had always been good with languages. She had been studying alien communications at the academy before she took the job on the Steady Wind. The Villani kept Katie in a cell that was made of some kind of clear material. She could see out, but she could not break the walls or the door. They had given her a bed that was too hard, and food that tasted like cardboard. Every day they would come and take her to a room where they would run tests on her. Research Commander Zixith was the alien in charge of studying her. He was even taller than the others, and his crystal skin had darker blue streaks running through it. He would poke her with instruments and take samples of her blood and hair. He would make her run on a machine while he measured her heartbeat. He would show her pictures and record how she reacted. Katie always acted scared and confused during the tests. She would cry sometimes or try to hide. She would act like she did not understand what was happening to her. But inside, she was watching and learning everything she could. She had figured out that the Villani thought humans were nothing special. They talked about her like she was an animal they had found in the woods. Research Commander Zixith had told the other scientists that humans were weak and primitive. He said that Earth was a small, unimportant planet, and that humans would never be able to travel to other stars. "Look at this creature," Zixith had said during one test, speaking in the Villani language while he measured Katie's muscles. "It has no natural weapons, no claws, no fangs, no armor. Its body is soft and slow. How did such a pathetic species even survive on its home planet?" The other Villani scientists had laughed. They thought it was funny that humans had no fur to keep them warm, and no special abilities like the ability to see in the dark or breathe underwater. They could not understand how humans had become the dominant species on Earth. Katie had wanted to tell them that humans had something better than claws or fangs. Humans had brains. They could think and plan and work together. They could use tools and make weapons and build spaceships. But she kept quiet and let them think she was stupid. Every day, Katie learned more about the alien ship. She memorized the layout of the corridors. She counted how many guards there were and when they changed shifts. She learned which aliens carried weapons and which ones were just scientists. She figured out how the doors worked and where the important rooms were located. The Villani had made a mistake by keeping her in a cell where she could see out. They thought she was just staring at nothing, but Katie was actually studying everything. She watched the aliens work and learned their routines. She saw how they operated their computers and their weapons. She listened to their conversations and learned about their technology. Katie also learned about their destination. The ship was traveling to a place called Research Station 7, where the Villani conducted experiments on creatures they captured from different planets. Katie did not know exactly what kinds of experiments they did there, but she knew it would not be good for her. She had been planning her escape for weeks, but she knew she needed to wait for the right moment. The ship was too big and there were too many aliens. If she tried to escape too early, they would just catch her again. But if she waited too long, they would reach the research station, and it would be too late. 3 weeks after her capture, Katie's chance finally came. She was in her cell, pretending to sleep, when she heard the sound of another human voice echoing through the corridors. The Villani had captured someone else. Katie sat up and pressed her ear to the wall. She could hear the aliens talking excitedly, in their language. They were dragging someone through the hallways and that someone was fighting back and shouting in English. A few minutes later, Katie saw them. 4 Villani guards were pulling a man in a torn military uniform down the corridor. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, with short dark hair and angry eyes. Even though his hands were tied behind his back, he was still trying to fight. "Let me go, you crystal-faced freaks," the man shouted. "When my people find out what you did, they're going to turn your ship into space dust." The Villani guards laughed at him, just like they laughed at Katie. They thought his threats were amusing. They did not understand that this man was different from Katie. This man was a soldier. They put the new prisoner in the cell next to Katie's, separated by another wall of the same clear material. As soon as the guards left, the man turned to look at Katie. His eyes were hard and calculating, and Katie could see that he was already planning something. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Katie nodded. "My name is Katie Sullivan. I've been here for 3 weeks. Jake Morrison, Captain, Earth Defense Force," the man replied. "I came here to get you out." Katie felt a spark of hope for the first time since her capture. The Villani thought they had caught 2 helpless humans. They had no idea what they had just done. They had no idea that the hunt was about to begin. Jake Morrison stood in his cell and looked around carefully. The walls were made of the same clear material as Katie's cell, but Jake was studying them differently. While Katie had spent weeks learning about the aliens, Jake was analyzing the prison itself. He pressed his hand against the wall that separated him from Katie. The material was strong, but Jake had experience with many different types of barriers. He could see tiny lines in the surface that showed how the wall was constructed. More importantly, he could see the energy field that powered the door lock. "How long have you been watching them?" Jake asked Katie quietly. "Every day since they captured me," Katie replied. "I know their routines, their language, and their weaknesses." Jake nodded. This girl was smarter than the aliens realized. "Tell me about the ship layout." Katie began to describe everything she had learned. She told Jake about the guard rotations, the location of the weapons storage, and the command center. She explained how many aliens were on the ship and which ones were dangerous. Jake listened carefully and asked questions that showed Katie he knew about military tactics. "You're not just a communications officer, are you?" Jake asked. "I was training to be one before I took the job on the cargo ship," Katie said. "But I've been studying these aliens like they're studying me." Research Commander Zixith arrived the next morning with several other Villani scientists. They were excited to have 2 human specimens to study. Zixith looked at Jake through the clear wall and made notes on a device he carried. "Fascinating," Zixith said in the Villani language. "This male is much larger than the female. Look at the muscle development. It appears to be some kind of warrior class." Senior researcher Nixal joined them. She was shorter than Zixith, but her crystal skin had more complex patterns. "Should we separate them further? They might try to work together." Zixith laughed. "Work together to do what? They are trapped on our ship with no weapons and no way to escape. Besides, I want to observe their social interactions. Do humans form pack bonds like some of the other primitive species we have studied?" The scientists decided to run an experiment. They used their technology to remove the wall between Jake and Katie's cells, creating one larger prison. They expected to see the humans fight over territory or resources, or perhaps try to mate. Instead, Jake and Katie sat down and began to talk. To the Villani scientists, it looked like simple conversation. They recorded everything, finding the human communication patterns interesting, but not important. "The engine room is on deck 7, Katie said, pretending to talk about her life before capture. "There are usually only 2 guards there during the night shift." "The armory is probably near the barracks," Jake replied. acting like he was sharing his own stories. If we can get weapons, we can control the ship. I've been causing small problems with their computers, Katie said. Nothing they can trace, but it's making them nervous. The Volani scientists thought the humans were just sharing their feelings about being captured. They had translation devices, but they only translated the basic meaning of words. They did not understand that Jake and Katie were actually making detailed plans. Jake began to test the aliens in small ways. He would ask innocent questions about their technology. He would exercise in his cell, pushing his body to its limits while the aliens watched. He would study the guards and learn their individual habits. "Why does this human keep moving around so much?" one guard asked another. "Primitive creatures often pace when they are caged," the guard replied. "It shows they have not accepted their fate." The guards did not realize that Jake was actually measuring distances, testing the strength of different materials, and learning the timing of their patrol routes. Every push-up, every stretch, every casual question was part of a larger plan. Senior researcher Nixall became particularly interested in Jake's behavior. She would stand outside the cell and watch him exercise, making notes about human physical capabilities. "His strength is impressive for such a primitive species," she told Zixith, "but look at how inefficient his movements are. Our people are much more graceful and coordinated." "Of course," Zixith agreed. "These creatures evolved from animals that lived in trees and caves. They never developed the elegant fighting styles of civilized species." Jake heard them talking and almost smiled. The aliens thought their graceful movements made them superior fighters. They had no idea that Jake had been trained in combat techniques that were designed to be brutal and effective, not pretty. After several days of observation, Jake decided it was time to make his statement. Research Commander Zixith was standing outside the cell with several other scientists, discussing their findings about human behavior. "You know what you don't understand about humans?" Jake said suddenly, speaking directly to Zixith. The aliens were surprised. The male human had never spoken to them directly before. Zixith activated his translation device and leaned closer to the cell. "What do you think we do not understand, primitive creature?" Zixith asked. "We are apex predators," Jake said calmly. The Volani scientists looked at each other and began to laugh. Nixall laughed so hard that her crystal skin changed color slightly. "Apex predators?" Zixith repeated. "You? Look at yourself, human. You have no claws, no fangs, no armor, no natural weapons of any kind. Your species cannot even fly or breathe underwater. You are soft, slow, and weak compared to the dominant species of any civilized world. Your planet Earth must have very pathetic predators if creatures like you could become dominant," Nixall added, still laughing. Jake looked at Katie, and she could see something dangerous in his eyes. The aliens had just made a terrible mistake. They had insulted not just Jake, but all of humanity. "You want to know what makes a species an apex predator?" Jake asked. "It's not claws or fangs or armor. It's the ability to hunt anything, anywhere, anytime. It's the refusal to give up. It's the intelligence to turn any situation to your advantage." The aliens were still amused. They thought Jake was just trying to make himself feel better about being captured. "Your words are meaningless," Zixith said. "You are trapped in our cell on our ship, completely at our mercy. How does that make you an apex predator?" "Because," Jake said, his voice becoming harder, "you just put two apex predators in the same cage. And now we know everything we need to know about you." Research Commander Zixith stopped laughing. There was something in the human's voice that made him uncomfortable, though he could not say why. "You are delusional," Zixith said. "But perhaps we should test your claims. I think it would be educational to demonstrate the superiority of Volani warriors over human primitives." "What do you have in mind?" Jake asked. Zixith smiled, showing teeth that were sharp and white like crystal. "A combat demonstration. You against one of our security officers. When you are defeated, perhaps you will understand your true place in the galaxy." Jake stood up slowly and looked Zixith directly in the eyes. "I accept your challenge." The other scientists began talking excitedly among themselves. This would be a perfect opportunity to show the captured humans how powerless they really were. They could record the fight and use it to break the spirits of both prisoners. They had no idea that Jake Morrison had been hoping they would make exactly this offer. They had no idea that they were about to learn what it really meant when humans called themselves apex predators. The hunt was about to begin, and the aliens had just made themselves the prey. The fighting arena was located in the lower section of the Villani ship. It was a large circular room with smooth metal walls and bright lights overhead. Most of the ship's crew had gathered to watch the fight. They were excited to see their security officer defeat the primitive human. Security Officer Krathmore entered the arena first. He was even taller than Research Commander Zixith, with broader shoulders and thicker crystal skin. Dark blue patterns covered his arms and chest like armor. He moved with the fluid grace that all Villani possessed, but there was power behind his movements that showed he was a trained warrior. Jake was brought into the arena with his hands still tied behind his back. 2 guards cut the ropes and stepped away quickly. Jake rubbed his wrists and looked around the room slowly. He was taking in every detail: the size of the space, the location of the exits, the way the lights created shadows. "This will be over quickly," Zixith announced to the crowd. "The human will learn that his species is no match for Villani superiority." The crew laughed and made comments about how small Jake looked compared to Krathmore. Katie watched from behind a clear barrier, her hands pressed against the wall. She could see something in Jake's posture that the aliens missed. He was not afraid. He was focused. "Begin," Zixith called out. Krathmore moved immediately, crossing the arena in 3 graceful steps. His crystal skin caught the light as he struck at Jake with movements too fast for most creatures to follow. His first punch should have ended the fight instantly, but Jake was not there anymore. He had moved just enough to let the blow pass by his head. Krathmore's fist hit empty air, and Jake was already turning to study his opponent's balance and reach. The second attack came faster than the first. Krathmore's leg swept toward Jake's knees in a move that would have shattered human bones. Again, Jake moved just enough to avoid the strike. He was not trying to counterattack yet. He was learning. "Why is he not fighting back?" one of the Villani crew members asked. "He is too slow and stupid to react properly," another replied. "Krathmore is playing with him." But Katie could see what was really happening. Jake was doing what human persistence hunters had done for thousands of years. He was studying his prey. Krathmore attacked again and again, each strike precise and powerful. His crystal skin provided natural armor, and his enhanced reflexes made him faster than any normal human. But Jake kept moving, kept dodging, kept learning. And slowly, something began to change. "You know what made humans the dominant species on Earth?" Jake said calmly as he avoided another punch. His breathing was steady despite the constant movement. "We were not the biggest predators. We were not the fastest or the strongest." Krathmore struck again, this time landing a glancing blow on Jake's shoulder. The impact would have disabled most creatures, but Jake absorbed it and kept moving. "We were persistence hunters," Jake continued. "Do you know what that means? It means we would pick a target and follow it. For hours. For days. We would never stop, never give up, never let our prey rest." The Villani crowd was becoming confused. The human should have been defeated by now. Krathmore had landed several hits, but the primitive creature was still standing, still talking, still moving. Jake began to change his strategy. Instead of just avoiding attacks, he started to study Krathmore's patterns more carefully. Every fighter had habits, and Jake was beginning to see them. The Villani warrior favored his right side. He put extra power into his third strike in each combination. He dropped his guard slightly when he turned to his left. On the African savanna, our ancestors would chase animals that were faster and stronger than them, Jake said. Antelopes, zebras, even large predators. These animals could outrun any human easily. But humans had something they did not have. Krathmore was breathing harder now. The crystal skin that protected him also made him heavier, and the constant attacking was taking energy. Jake, meanwhile, seemed to be getting more comfortable with the fight. "Endurance," Jake said, "and the ability to think." Jake made his first real attack. It was not graceful like Krathmore's movements. It was simple and direct. A punch aimed at a spot where he had seen the crystal skin was thinner. Crathmore blocked it easily, but he had to use more energy to do so. The pattern of the fight began to shift. Jake was no longer just defending. He was making Crathmore work harder for each attack. The Villani warrior was still faster and stronger, but Jake was making him use that speed and strength inefficiently. "Your warrior is skilled," Jake said to the watching crowd. "But he fights like someone who has always been the strongest person in the room. He has never learned to fight an opponent who refuses to give up." Crathmore attempted a complex spinning attack that should have ended the fight. But Jake had seen him prepare for it, and he was already moving. As the Villani warrior spun, Jake stepped inside his reach and landed a solid hit to his ribs. The crowd gasped. A few cracks appeared in Crathmore's crystal skin where Jake had struck. It was the first real damage the human had inflicted. "Humans are not apex predators because we are the best at any one thing," Jake said. "We are apex predators because we are good enough at everything. We can adapt to any situation. We can learn from any mistake, and we never ever give up." Crathmore was slowing down. His graceful movements were becoming less precise. The constant attacking had exhausted him, while Jake seemed to be getting stronger as the fight continued. "This is impossible," Zixith muttered. "The human should have been defeated easily." "Your mistake," Jake said, landing another hit on Crathmore's damaged ribs, "was thinking that being an apex predator means being the biggest or the strongest. But do you know what the real apex predators of Earth were?" Jake ducked under a desperate swing from Crathmore and struck him in the same spot again. More cracks appeared in the crystal skin. "Humans," Jake said. "We hunted everything. We hunted the biggest predators, the fastest prey, the most dangerous animals on the planet. And we won every time, not because we were better than them at what they did best, but because we were smarter." Crathmore stumbled. His breathing was labored and his attacks were becoming wild and uncontrolled. Jake, meanwhile, was still calm and focused. He had turned the fight from a test of strength into a battle of endurance and intelligence. We learned their patterns. We adapted to their strategies. We used tools and tactics and teamwork. Most importantly, we never stopped hunting until we got what we wanted. Jake landed a final combination of strikes, targeting the weakened spots in Crathmore's armor. The Villani warrior's crystal skin cracked further, and he dropped to one knee, gasping for breath. The arena fell completely silent. The Villani crew stared in shock as their trained security officer knelt defeated before the primitive human. This was supposed to be impossible. Their technology, their genetic enhancements, their superior evolution. None of it had been enough. Jake stood over Crathmore, barely breathing hard. He looked up at Research Commander Zixth and the watching crowd. "That is what it means to be an apex predator," Jake said quietly. "It is not about being the strongest or the fastest. It is about being the smartest, the most adaptable, and the most determined. It is about never giving up no matter what the odds are." He paused and looked directly at Zixith. "And right now, you have 2 apex predators on your ship. We have been studying you, learning about you, planning our next move. You thought you captured 2 helpless specimens. But what you really did was trap 2 of Earth's most dangerous predators in a confined space with your entire crew." The silence in the arena stretched on. For the first time since Katie's capture, the Villani were beginning to understand that they might have made a terrible mistake. The hunt was no longer a future possibility. It had already begun. The ship felt different after Jake's victory in the arena. The Villani crew moved through the corridors more quietly. They looked over their shoulders more often. The easy confidence they had shown before was gone, replaced by something they had never felt on their own ship before: fear. Research Commander Zixith tried to maintain control over his crew. He called a meeting in the main conference room and told his officers that the fight had been a fluke. Humans were still primitive creatures, he insisted. One lucky victory did not change the facts about their inferior biology, but his words sounded hollow even to himself. He had watched Jake Morrison defeat their best security officer through nothing but intelligence and determination. The human had turned Crathmore's own strengths against him, and he had done it while explaining exactly how he was doing it. Jake and Katie were returned to their shared cell, but the guards who escorted them were nervous. They kept their weapons ready and maintained a safe distance. The humans were no longer seen as harmless specimens, they were seen as dangerous unknowns. "How do you feel?" Katie asked Jake once they were alone. "Like we just sent a message," Jake replied. "Now they know we are not helpless. That is going to make them make mistakes." Katie had been busy during the fight. While everyone was watching the arena, she had used her knowledge of the ship's systems to cause new problems. Small ones, carefully planned to look like random technical failures. The first sign came during the night shift. The lights in Section C flickered for exactly 30 seconds, then returned to normal. The engineering team checked the power systems, but found nothing wrong. 2 hours later, the artificial gravity in the crew quarters fluctuated. Several Volani crew members felt momentarily lighter, then heavier than normal again. The engineers ran diagnostics on the gravity generators, but all systems showed green. The third incident happened in the galley. The food preparation systems shut down for 10 minutes, then restarted by themselves. The technicians could find no cause for the malfunction. "These are just random technical problems," Chief Engineer Vorthak told Zixith. "Old ships develop these kinds of issues." But Zixith was beginning to suspect otherwise. The problems had started right after the arena fight. The human had said they were apex predators and that they had been studying the ship. What if these malfunctions were not random at all? Jake began his own form of psychological warfare. Whenever a guard came near their cell, he would start talking. Not to the guard directly, but to Katie, loud enough for the alien to hear. "You know what I learned about their security systems?" Jake would say. "They rely too much on technology and not enough on training. Most of their guards have never faced a real threat." Or he would say, "Their weapons are impressive, but they are designed for long-range combat. In close quarters, a human with the right training could take one before they could draw it." The guards tried to ignore him, but Jake could see that his words were having an effect. They stood further from the cell. They checked their weapons more often. They called for backup when they did not really need it. Katie played her part perfectly. During her daily medical examinations, she continued to act cooperative and harmless. But she was actually using each session to gather more intelligence about the ship's computer systems. The medical bay was connected to the main computer network. Every time the aliens ran tests on her, Katie was able to access small parts of their database. She learned about the ship's destination, its crew complement, and most importantly, its defensive capabilities. "I found something interesting," Katie told Jake during one of their quiet conversations. "This ship is not just a research vessel. It is also carrying important data about human colonies to their home world." Jake's eyes became hard. "What kind of data?" "Population numbers, defense capabilities, trade routes, everything they would need to plan an invasion. This changed everything. Jake and Katie were not just prisoners anymore. They were the only people who could stop the Volani from using this information to attack human settlements." The technical problems continued throughout the week. Doors would open and close by themselves. Computer terminals would display error messages in languages the Volani did not recognize. Environmental controls would adjust themselves without any input from the crew. The crew began to whisper among themselves. Some said the ship was cursed. Others believed they had picked up some kind of computer virus from the human vessels. A few suggested that the humans might be causing the problem somehow, but they were quickly told that such a thing was impossible. Jake escalated his psychological campaign. He began telling stories about human history to any alien who would listen. Stories about small groups of humans defeating much larger and more powerful enemies through guerrilla tactics and psychological warfare. On Earth, there was once a war where a few thousand human fighters defeated the most powerful military in the world, Jake told a nervous guard. They did it by making their enemies afraid. Fear makes people make mistakes, and mistakes can be exploited. Another time, he said, humans have a saying. It is not the size of the dog in the fight, it is the size of the fight in the dog. You aliens are bigger and stronger than us, but you have never had to fight for your survival. We have. Senior. Researcher Nixall became convinced that the humans were somehow responsible for the technical problems. She approached Zixith with her concerns. The malfunction started after the arena fight, she said, and they are getting worse. Yesterday my computer terminal showed me human text that said, "We are watching you." That cannot be a coincidence. Zixith wanted to dismiss her fears, but he was having doubts of his own. The humans seemed too calm for prisoners facing dissection at a research station. They acted like they had a plan. Even if they are causing some technical problems, what can they do? Zixith asked. They are locked in a cell with no weapons and no way to access the ship's critical systems. I think we underestimated them, Nixal replied. The male human said they were apex predators. Maybe we should have listened more carefully to what that means. The breaking point came when the ship's communication system began broadcasting a message to nearby space. It was a human distress signal, transmitted on frequencies that only human ships would monitor. The message gave the ship's location and warned that humans were being held prisoner aboard a hostile alien vessel. Chief Engineer Vorthak shut down the communication system immediately, but the damage was done. The message had been transmitted for over an hour before anyone noticed it. How is this possible? Zixith demanded. The humans cannot access our communication systems from their cell. I do not know, Vorthak admitted. But somehow they did it. Jake smiled when he saw the panic in the alien's eyes. The distress signal had been Katie's masterpiece, a carefully planned hack that she had been preparing for weeks. She had used her access during medical examinations to plant code in the ship's computer system, code that would activate when the right conditions were met. You look worried, Jake said to a passing guard. You should be. That distress signal will bring human ships looking for us. And when they find this ship, they are going to want to know why you kidnapped human civilians. The guard hurried away without responding. Katie leaned close to Jake and whispered, The really clever part is that the signal also contained data about their ship's defenses and crew size. When the human fleet arrives, they will know exactly what they are facing. Jake nodded. Good work. But we are not going to wait for rescue. We are going to take this ship ourselves. How? Jake looked around their cell one more time, taking in all the details he had memorized over the past week. Because they made the same mistake that every species makes when they try to cage an apex predator. They forgot that the most dangerous place to be is between a predator and its prey. He turned to look directly at the security camera that was watching them. And right now, Commander Zixith, you and your crew have become our prey. In the command center, Zixith watched the monitor and felt a chill run through his crystal skin. The human was looking directly at the camera, directly at him, with the calm confidence of a predator that had finished stalking its target. For the first time since the capture began, Zixith realized that he and his crew might not survive their encounter with the humans. They had not captured specimens for study. They had trapped apex predators on their own ship, and now the hunt was about to begin in earnest. The escape began at 0300 hours during the quiet of the night shift. Katie had spent weeks learning the timing of every system on the ship. She knew exactly when the security scans would reset, when the guards would change positions, and when the ship's computer would be most vulnerable. The first sign that something was wrong came from the environmental controls. The temperature in the crew quarters suddenly dropped to freezing levels. Emergency alarms began to sound as the life support systems struggled to compensate. Half the crew rushed to their emergency stations while the other half tried to figure out what had gone wrong. In the confusion, no one noticed that the energy field keeping Jake and Katie locked in their cell had quietly shut down. The door slid open with a soft whisper, and the two humans stepped out into the corridor. Security cameras? Jake asked quietly. Disabled on decks 4 through 7, Katie replied. We have about 10 minutes before they figure out how to restart them. They moved through the ship like shadows. Katie led the way, using her memorized knowledge of the layout to avoid the main corridors where guards might be stationed. Jake followed, his military training keeping him alert for any signs of danger. Their first stop was the weapons storage room. Katie had learned the access codes by watching the guards enter them during her weeks of observation. The door opened silently, revealing rows of Villani energy weapons and armor. Jake selected 2 of the smaller weapons, testing their weight and balance. The aliens had made them for their own physiology, But Jake adapted quickly. He also grabbed several pieces of their communication equipment. "Can you access the main computer from here?" Jake asked. Katie moved to a terminal near the back of the room. Her fingers flew over the alien controls as she navigated through systems she had been studying for weeks. "Give me 2 minutes." While Katie worked, Jake rigged several of the energy weapons to overload. If anyone tried to enter the weapons room after them, they would find some unpleasant surprises waiting. "Done," Katie said. "I've locked down all the security doors on the upper decks. The crew is trapped in their quarters and emergency stations. I've also taken control of the ship's navigation system." "Where are we going?" Jake asked. "Home," Katie replied with a smile. They moved deeper into the ship, heading for the command center. The corridors were eerily quiet now. The emergency alarms had stopped, but the normal sounds of the ship had changed. Instead of the confident hum of a well-run vessel, there was an undertone of panic and confusion. Research Commander Zixith was in the command center, trying desperately to regain control of his ship. Half of his systems were not responding. The other half were giving him false readings, and his crew was scattered throughout the ship, dealing with what appeared to be cascading system failures. "Report," he demanded as Chief Engineer Vorthak stumbled onto the bridge. "The humans are gone," Vorthak said, his crystal skin pale with fear. "Their cell is empty, and we cannot find them anywhere. The security cameras on 3 decks are not working, and the computer is not responding to our commands." "That is impossible," Zixth said. "2 primitive creatures cannot take control of a Volani starship." "Tell that to the ship," Vorthak replied. "Because right now, they are in control, and we are not." As if responding to his words, Jake's voice came over the ship's communication system. "Attention, crew of the Kethmaran. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. Your ship is now under human control." Zixth rushed to his command chair and activated his microphone. "This is Research Commander Zixith. You cannot possibly control this ship. Return to your cell immediately, and we will consider reducing your punishment." Jake's laughter echoed through the speakers. "Commander, you still do not understand what you are dealing with. Let me explain something to you about apex predators. We do not just hunt other animals. We hunt other predators. We are the only species on Earth that actively seeks out the most dangerous creatures and defeats them." Katie's voice joined Jake's on the communication system. "For the past month, while you thought you were studying me, I was actually studying your ship. Every test you ran, every examination you performed, gave me access to your computer systems. I have been planning this escape since the day you captured me." The lights on the command bridge flickered and went out, leaving only the emergency lighting. In the dim red glow, Zixith could see his crew members looking around nervously. "You see, Commander," Jake continued, "humans have been dealing with superior predators for millions of years. We learned to survive by being smarter, more adaptable, and more determined than anything that tried to hunt us. And when something threatened us, we did not just run away. We turned the tables and became the hunters." Zixith tried to access his ship's weapon systems, but the controls would not respond. He tried to send a distress signal to other Volani ships, but the communication array had been completely taken over by the humans. "Your mistake," Katie said over the speakers, "was thinking that technology made you superior. But technology is just a tool, and humans are very good at using tools." The main door to the command center opened, and Jake and Katie walked in. They were carrying Volani energy weapons, and they moved with the calm confidence of predators who had cornered their prey. The remaining bridge crew backed away from them, clustering around Zixith's command chair. These were scientists and technicians, not warriors. They had never been in a real fight, and they did not know how to react to the 2 humans who had somehow taken control of their ship. "This is our ship now," Jake said simply. "You are going to help us send a message to your government." "I will never cooperate with primitive terrorists," Zixith replied, trying to sound braver than he felt. Katie moved to the main computer terminal and began typing commands. "You do not have to cooperate, Commander. I can send the message myself, but you might want to see what I am sending first." The main screen activated, showing a detailed report that Katie had compiled during her weeks of captivity. It contained everything she had learned about Volani technology, their military capabilities, their plans for human colonies, and most importantly, the location of their homeworld. This information is being transmitted to every human military base and colonial government in known space, Katie explained. Your people thought they could study us in secret and plan an invasion. But now we know everything about you. Zixith stared at the screen in horror. The humans had not just escaped. They had turned the Volani's own intelligence gathering against them. Earth would now know about the Volani threat before any attack could be launched. You cannot do this, Zixith said. My government will send ships to destroy you. Jake smiled, and for the first time Zixith understood why the other crew members had been so afraid of him. Let them come, Commander. Do you know what happens on Earth when predators threaten human territory? We hunt them down, Katie added. We track them to their dens, we study their weaknesses, and we eliminate the threat completely. You are declaring war on the entire Volani Empire, Zixith said. No, Jake replied. You declared war on humanity when you started kidnapping our people. We are just making sure you understand what kind of species you chose to make your enemy. The ship's navigation system activated, and Zixith could feel the vessel changing course. They were no longer heading toward the Volani research station. They were heading toward human space. Where are you taking us? Zixith asked. To meet with Human Military Command, Katie said. You and your crew are going to help us understand your technology and your empire's capabilities. And then you are going to help us make sure this never happens to another human being. Jake looked around at the frightened Volani crew. You wanted to study apex predators, Commander. Congratulations, you are about to get a very detailed education in what that really means. As the ship continued toward human space, Zixith finally understood the full scope of his mistake. He had not captured two helpless specimens. He had awakened sleeping predators and given them every reason to hunt his people. The Volani Empire had made an enemy of humanity. And as every species on Earth had learned over millions of years of evolution, making an enemy of an apex predator was the last mistake you ever made. The hunt was over. The predators had won. And now the real education was about to begin.